March 2024, 60 miles south of Crete, in open Mediterranean water, a sonar operator aboard the Hellenic frigate, HS Nikiforos Fokas, is watching a single green trace crawl across his display. 12 knots, steady bearing. A bulk carrier, nothing more. Then the trace does something a bulk carrier's engine noise should never do. It splits. Buried underneath the churn of a single screw, there is a second rhythm, quieter, slower, out of phase with the first. Two signatures, one contact. Someone is riding beneath that ship's hull, and they are not supposed to be there. The operator flags it to the officer of the watch. A second technician cross-checks the passive array. Both agree. This is not a false return, not biologics, not a fishing trawler's wake bouncing off the thermocline. Something with a hull is hiding inside the freighter's acoustic shadow. The watch team has done 3 years together on this frigate, rotating through the same 4-hour blocks, and each of them knows the sound library for this stretch of the Mediterranean, by ear as much as by display. Cargo ships, ferries, the occasional pod of sperm whales working the Hellenic trench. None of it sounds like this. What they are looking at, though nobody on that bridge knows it yet, is a Russian Improved Kilo-class submarine called Novorossiysk, tucked directly beneath a Panama-flagged bulk carrier, using the merchant ship's own noise as a blanket to walk through one of the busiest choke points in the Mediterranean. For the next 41 minutes, the two vessels will move as one shadow, and by the end of it, a Greek helicopter crew and a NATO patrol aircraft will have turned a quiet piece of Russian tradecraft into a documented chase across the Ionian Sea. Rewind a few hours. The Aegean and the waters south of Crete sit at the edge of a choke point NATO watches constantly, the corridor where the eastern Mediterranean funnels toward the Aegean and eventually the Dardanelles. Since Russia's Black Sea Fleet started losing ships to Ukrainian missiles and drones in 2022 and 2023, more of Moscow's submarine activity has shifted here, into water NATO patrols but does not fully own. The Novorossiysk is a Project 636.3 Improved Kilo, one of 6 Russia built for exactly this kind of quiet work. Western navies nicknamed the class Black Hole decades ago, for how little sound it puts into the water. Diesel-electric, hunter-killer by design, built to sit still and listen. Sitting still is not what it was doing that week. It was trying to move, undetected, past a NATO member's coastline, and it had found a way to make a slow freighter do its hiding for it. The trick itself is old. Submariners have known for generations that a large ship's engine and propeller noise can mask a smaller, quieter contact riding in its baffles, close beneath the hull where the surface vessel's own machinery drowns out the submarine's signature. It works on paper. It is difficult and dangerous in practice, because a few meters of misjudged depth means a collision, and no rescue crew is coming for a submarine crushed under a bulk carrier's keel in the middle of the night. Whoever was conning the Novorossiysk that week was good enough, or reckless enough, to try it anyway. I spent a while going through the Hellenic Navy's public statements and the open-source tracking data from that week, and one detail kept nagging at me. The bulk carrier never slowed down, never altered course. As far as its own crew knew, they were just another cargo run through the Med, nothing riding beneath them at all. AIS records show the ship was carrying grain out of a Black Sea port, bound for Piraeus, with a crew of 22, mostly Filipino and Georgian sailors on a standard rotation, the kind of unremarkable voyage that happens hundreds of times a year in this corridor. None of them had any reason to think about what might be riding in their wake, and nothing in their training would have prepared them for it if they had. Confirming a hunch on sonar is not the same as proving it. The sea state that week was rough enough to add noise to every return, and for the first stretch after the initial detection, the Nikiforos Fokas crew had a strong suspicion, and nothing they could act on. A single ambiguous trace is not something you report up the NATO chain as a submarine intrusion. You could be wrong. You could start an incident over a whale pod and a bad thermal layer. So they waited, and they listened, and they cross-referenced the trace against the freighter's known engine profile from shipping databases. The mismatch held. Whatever was down there did not match the carrier's registered machinery at all. That was enough to escalate. Ashore, at the Hellenic Navy's Fleet Acoustic Center outside Suda Bay, a duty analyst pulled the frigate's raw contact file the moment it uploaded and ran it against a library of archived Kilo-class transits going back years. It wasn't a perfect match. Submarines vary their signature run to run deliberately, but the blade count and shaft rate lined up close enough that the analyst flagged it as high-confidence Russian submarine activity before the frigate's own report had even finished transmitting. A signal went out from the frigate to the Hellenic Navy's Maritime Operations Center, and from there into the broader NATO surveillance picture that covers this stretch of the Mediterranean. Within the hour, assets that had been doing routine patrol work elsewhere were being quietly redirected toward a single freighter's course line. Here's what's most surprising about this case. It wasn't a sensor breakthrough that cracked it open. It was math. NATO's acoustic net, the fixed and mobile listening systems that blanket this region, had been reading the freighter and its hidden passenger as one contact the entire time. The deception was working exactly as designed. The frigate had a hunch, a mismatched engine signature, and nothing else. Confirming a submarine was actually down there would take more than passive listening. It would take putting something in the water. And 200 nautical miles away, at Naval Air Station Sigonella in Sicily, a P-8 Poseidon crew was about to get a call that would send them east instead of home. Word moved fast once the picture firmed up. A Greek Navy MH-60R Seahawk, flying off the frigate's own deck, was vectored to loiter near the freighter's projected track. Its job was simple to describe and hard to execute. Get a dipping sonar transducer into the water directly astern of the ship, close enough to separate the two acoustic signatures for good. Dipping sonar work near a moving 50,000-ton bulk carrier is not gentle flying. The helicopter has to hover low, lower a cable-mounted sensor into the wake turbulence behind the hull, and hold position while the ship's own screw noise floods the sensor. Too close, and the rotor wash and the freighter's wake mask everything. Too far, and you lose whatever is hiding underneath. The crew got it right. The dip returned a hard classification. Diesel-electric submarine, 6 blades, a signature consistent with an improved kilo. Not a whale, not noise. A hostile submarine, riding beneath a civilian ship, 60 miles off a NATO member's coast. Here is where the picture gets more complicated than a simple detection story. The freighter's crew had no idea any of this was happening. Under international maritime law, a submarine transiting submerged beneath a civilian vessel in international waters isn't clearly illegal, not in the way an armed intercept would be. It sits in a gray zone, not an act of war, not ordinary passage, something naval lawyers have argued about for years without much consensus. That gray zone was the entire point. If the Novorossiysk could ride the freighter's noise all the way past Crete and into open water beyond the Aegean approaches, Greece and NATO would have nothing solid to object to. A submarine simply transiting the Mediterranean, using the sea the way anyone is allowed to. Except now it had been heard. Word reached the P-8 Poseidon crew out of Sigonella, and they turned east. A Poseidon's job in a moment like this is to seed a barrier, a pattern of sonobuoys dropped ahead of where the target is expected to go, so that no matter which way the submarine turns, something is listening. It is patient, deliberate work, closer to laying a net than to a chase. By the time the Poseidon crew had their first line of buoys in the water, the Novorossiysk's cover was already unraveling on the surface, 60 miles away, in a decision nobody aboard the submarine had made. The freighter altered course. Nothing dramatic. Just a routine turn toward Piraeus, the port that had been its destination the entire time. Ships adjust heading constantly for traffic separation, for weather, for a dozen mundane reasons a merchant captain never thinks twice about. The submerged contact did not turn with it. For a few critical minutes, the two signatures that had moved as one for 41 minutes began to separate. The submarine held its old heading, toward open water, away from port, away from the freighter that had been carrying it in disguise. That was the moment the deception broke. A slow, oblivious freighter captain, adjusting course for a harbor pilot rendezvous he'd been briefed on days earlier, had just done what Greek sonar operators, a helicopter crew, and a maritime patrol aircraft together had not fully managed to do on sound alone. He'd exposed the submarine simply by acting normally. There was a real chance the Novorossiysk would simply vanish once separated from its cover. Improved kilos are quiet enough that in open water, without a masking freighter, a submarine crew that knows it's been made can go deep, slow down further, and become nearly invisible again within minutes. The MH-60 crew held position over the last confirmed position, refusing to break off even as fuel state ticked toward bingo. The Poseidon, already vectoring east, pushed its sonobuoy pattern further out ahead of the submarine's last known course, rather than its old one. betting on where a submarine commander who knew he'd been caught would actually run. The bet paid off. Buos picked up transient contact consistent with a kilo running at increased speed, no longer trying to hide its acoustic signature at all, now simply trying to put distance between itself and the aircraft overhead. So here's the second layer of this story, the one that doesn't get talked about as much as the clever hiding trick. Once caught, the Novorossiysk didn't fight, didn't surface, didn't do anything a Hollywood script would demand. It ran, quietly, professionally, exactly the way a submarine crew that knows the encounter is already lost is trained to behave. What strikes me about this whole episode is what it says about the current state of the game in the Mediterranean. This wasn't a Cold War cat and mouse between two purpose-built hunter-killers slugging it out over days. It was a diesel-electric boat gambling on a civilian ship's ignorance, caught not by superior sonar technology, but by a cargo captain who had no idea he was part of a military deception in the first place. Put yourself in that Poseidon crew's seat for a second. You've got a barrier of sonobuoys in the water, a fuel clock running, and a submarine somewhere in your search box that has every incentive to go deep, go quiet, and simply wait you out. Every minute you don't reacquire, the probability of ever finding it again drops. They didn't have unlimited minutes. Maritime patrol missions run on strict fuel reserves, and a P-8 loitering over open ocean has maybe a few hours of useful station time before it has to turn for Sigonella. The window to convert a transient contact into a confirmed track was closing in real time. Here's the part that doesn't quite make sense on the surface. A submarine running at increased speed to escape detection is, by definition, making more noise, not less. Every knot of speed a kilo adds trades stealth for distance. The Novorossiysk's crew had to choose between staying quiet and getting caught standing still, or getting loud and betting they could outrun the search box before anyone locked on for good. They chose speed, and for a window of maybe 20 minutes, that trade actually worked in the Poseidon crew's favor. A faster, noisier submarine is an easier submarine to reacquire on sonobuoys, tuned for exactly that kind of transient. The barrier held. Sonobuoy after sonobuoy reported passing contact consistent with the same six-bladed signature the helicopter had classified less than an hour earlier. The Novorossiysk was no longer hidden beneath anything. It was alone, tracked, and running for water deep enough to disappear in. Whether it succeeded is where the official record gets deliberately thin. Hellenic Navy statements from that period confirm a submarine contact was detected, classified, and tracked south of Crete in March 2024. They do not confirm how long the track was held, or whether the Novorossiysk eventually shook the pursuit entirely once it reached deeper water toward the Ionian Basin. Here's the take that'll probably annoy some people watching this. I don't think Greece or NATO actually wanted to force this to a dramatic conclusion. A submerged foreign submarine hiding under a merchant ship is provocative, but not illegal enough to justify anything beyond tracking it and letting it know it had been seen. The entire response, the helicopter, the Poseidon, the sonobuoy barrier, reads less like an intercept and more like a very expensive, very public way of saying, we know you're there, and we can prove it. That's a deterrence play, not a confrontation. And I think that's exactly what it was designed to be. Would you have played it differently if you were the one giving the order from that maritime operations center? Push harder, force a surface, make it a real diplomatic incident, or is quietly proving you caught them enough? What do you think? Does simply detecting and tracking a submarine like this actually deter the next attempt, or does it just teach the other side to hide better next time? The diplomatic aftermath was almost anticlimactic. No formal protest was filed that made headlines. No press conference. No. The kind of encounter this was, submerged, ambiguous, technically defensible under maritime law, almost never produces one. What it produces instead is a quiet addition to both sides' understanding of the other. Greece now has a documented case of exactly how a Kilo-class boat attempts this maneuver in practice. Russia's Black Sea Fleet, already stretched thin and increasingly routed through the eastern Mediterranean, since losing so much of its Sevastopol infrastructure to drone and missile strikes, has one fewer clean transit to show for the attempt. As for the freighter, its crew likely never learned what had ridden beneath their hull for the better part of an hour that day. Commercial shipping databases show it continued on to Piraeus, discharged cargo, and went back to the ordinary business of moving freight around the Mediterranean, entirely unaware it had briefly been the most valuable piece of camouflage in the eastern basin. the open question that lingers. The one Hellenic Navy officers reportedly raised in internal after-action discussions is how many times this exact maneuver has worked before. Sonar operators only catch what a mismatched engine signature and a rough patch of luck let them catch. For every Novorossiysk that got made off Crete, there is no way of knowing how many quieter transits went through the same choke point clean. That's the uncomfortable footnote to a story that otherwise reads like a win. 41 minutes of successful deception, undone in the end not by superior technology, but by an oblivious freighter captain making a routine turn toward port. The next submarine trying the same trick will know to brief its masking vessel's course changes in advance, or pick a freighter with a more predictable route. There's a piece of the Hellenic Navy's internal report we couldn't fully verify for this video. Details about exactly how close that dipping sonar pass came to the freighter's own screws. If you've seen the full account, drop it in the comments. I'd like to get it right. For now, what's confirmed is enough. A Russian Improved Kilo tried to walk 60 miles past Crete underneath a Panama-flagged bulk carrier's own noise. A Greek frigate sonar team caught the mismatch. A Seahawk crew confirmed it. A Poseidon out of Sigonella boxed it in. And a cargo captain who never knew any of this was happening turned toward Piraeus at exactly the wrong moment for the submarine hiding beneath him. If stories like this, the quiet ones that never make the evening news but decide who controls a choke point, are the kind of naval history you want more of, subscribe to the channel. Hit like if you'd have made the same call NATO did, tracking rather than confronting. And tell me in the comments which encounter in the Mediterranean you want covered next. There are more of these than most people realize.